Hi, I'm Nick Morrow, the Director of Sales and Marketing for Cabot Guns and Alchemy Custom Weaponry. I was recently at our Fort Wayne production facility and I followed Kyle Alberta, our production manager, around with the camera so I can give you this ACW Unplugged behind the scenes look at what our gunsmiths do to turn made in America real steel parts into a fully hand fit and finished Alchemy Custom Weaponry 1911. For part 2, we're going to connect with Mark to see a little bit of what goes into the most critical component of a 1911, and that's the fitting of the barrel. This is like the core part of the entire gun, and this has to be done right. Now, like I said in part 1, we're not going to show you all of the steps because that would make a very, very long video, but this is going to give you a glimpse into the amount of work it takes to fit the upper and lower lugs and chamber a 9mm 1911 barrel. Enjoy.
All right, so we're going to talk with Mark about barreling a little bit. He's setting up a 9mm barrel right now, so you already had to cut the hood length?
So the length was pretty good on this one. I
Okay.
had to cut the width on it. On the 9s, that's more common.
Okay.
The 45s, at least with the barrels that we have, 45s need to be shortened. The 9s kind of need to be skinnier.
But you pretty much have to modify every hood in some way.
That's correct.
Right,
Yep.
okay. So we're looking for no light between the hood and the breech face, and just a little bit on each side so that it has a little room to get in and out of battery.
Yeah, just enough wiggle room to where it's not going to be interfering with the slide, so that way it's free to move, free to break down when the gun is firing.
Okay, so you got that all set up. Now you need to set the vertical engagement of the barrel.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm working on the upper lugs right now. I've got them all marked up. Looks like I've already got some marks there, but I'm going to put it in the gun, and I use a series of gauge pins to kind of work my way up to where I want it. So right now I still have a little bit of lockup here I need to get rid of before I move on to the next step. So right in here, so right now you can see some good contact right up top. I've already kind of worked on the sides and worked my way up to the middle there.
So the contact kind of moves its way up
Correct.
the lugs. Okay.
So when you first put it in there, it's just kind of hitting on the sides, and it won't go all the way up because there's too much interference there. Once you bring that in, it kind of raises up and it slowly kind of creeps up towards the top.
So how will you know where to stop vertically?
So I typically go to a like a 195, 196 gauge pin. At that point, I will cut the lower lugs. So there are a couple different ways to do it. So you can go up to a certain, a little bit higher of a pin, but we have these gauges here, and we will drop that in, and this little pin right here fits in where the firing pin shoots out. And when that lines up, then we know that it's perfectly centered with the slide.
So that ensures that the barrel bore is exactly in center with the slide bore.
Correct.
Okay.
Now here I'm trying to knock down those high points, but I also want to keep it nice and clean. I don't want any facets or anything. I don't want it to look terrible as well. So I'll mark it up again. And it is a lot of back and forth with this.
Yeah.
Mark it up, pop it in the slide, take it out, file a little bit, take it back out, mark it back up.
So it's repetitive.
Very repetitive, yes. So right now I still have a little bit of lockup, but I'm going to go ahead and test to see where I'm at. And we're just about there. It wants to go in, but not quite. It's still sticking a little bit.
So with 9mm, obviously you have a small pistol primer, and we have a smaller firing pin hole than traditionally a 1911 would have. So it probably becomes especially important for a 9mm to have that barrel centered right on the firing pin hole.
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So just kind of gives you less room to work with.
Yeah, and it's not a super tight chamber on the 9mm, so there's going to be some variance in where that firing pin hits anyway, so we want to hold it as tight as we possibly can.
Correct. So right now I didn't feel any lockup with that gauge pin, so I'm going to go ahead and test this again. I think we're going to be right where we want to be, and that guy's popping right in.
Nice.
So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and cut the lower lugs. So I'm going to make sure that the barrel is centered with this little guy right there. That way I'm not cutting it off to the side. It's got a little bit of wiggle with the hood fit in there. But we don't want it sitting offset and having all contact on one side or the other. We want to have even contact all the way across.
So what's this tool you're installing right now?
So this is just going to hold the barrel in place. So when I cut the lugs, I'm not cutting too far or not enough because the barrel's moving up and down. I want it fully in battery when I cut those lugs. So that way I'm not just barely touching it, I'm actually cutting across where I want it to be.
Okay, so just pushing it firmly into the upper lugs. And we know it's centered because you have your centering block there.
Yep.
What's that tool you're installing in the frame?
This is just something to protect the frame. So I'm going to clamp the vise on this jig here instead of on the frame. But even if I were to put it on the frame, this kind of helps, fill it in so I don't collapse the frame and squeeze it too hard. So this right here is the lug cutter. So I'm just gonna pop that in there. I'm going to just rotate it. As I push the barrel into it, it's going to cut those lower lugs to a dimension that we want. And we want to make sure that it goes far enough forward so that the thumb safety will actually engage in with the slide. I'm going to run back and forth a couple of times and make sure that it's flat all the way across. A lot of times, especially if you end up having a looser slide to frame fit, if you really crank it forward, it's going to kind of tilt a little bit. You'll take too much material off the back and you'll end up with a very snappy barrel, which we don't want. So now that I've cut the lower lugs, I'm going to check the contact on the bottom here with the slide stop that I've already fit to the gun. And what I'm checking for here is to make sure that I have contact on both sides as even as possible. And also, I'm going to be checking for barrel bump. That's where the slide stop hits in front of the lugs. If you have barrel bump, it's going to end up deforming the lugs. It's going to ruin your barrel fit. It's just kind of a bad day all around eventually. Now there will be barrel bump on this, and I will have to remove that. So I can feel some lockup, which is good. We do want lockup. We don't want any loose barrels. Loose barrels are not accurate barrels typically. So we have nice even contact. We got a little bit of barrel bump on this side here. I'm going to take a file to that, eventually an air file, and I want to keep that contact as even as I possibly can. After I remove the barrel bump, smooth it out, polish it up, I'll be installing the barrel link and the link, making sure that I have the correct link in there. A lot of that depends on the measurement here, how it fits with the frame. So I'll also check that with the slide stop to make sure that it's not riding on the link or riding on the stop itself. We want the stop to ride on the lugs and have good contact throughout.
So if you had a link that, when it was all the way up, stood proud of the lugs, that would probably sacrifice lug contact, right?
Yeah.
At that point, all of this handwork was for naught.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so you're getting ready to chamber this barrel at this point.
Correct. Yeah.
What's the first thing you're going to check?
Well, right now I know that it just needs to be chambered, so I'm going to go ahead and just do like a preliminary cut with this. We're going to be able to see a line after that, and basically the chamber is not cut deep enough, and I'm going to chase that line all the way kind of almost to the bottom, and that's where I'm going to grab the go gauge here and start making measurements.
Okay, so before we even measure it, we're going to run a reamer in there redundantly just to make sure that it's chambered to width and everything like that. Okay. What's your favorite part of setting up a barrel in a gun?
I think my favorite part is when I have it all said and done, I can feel that slide stop just slide over the bottom lugs.
Feeling that lower lug engagement?
Just knowing I've got a perfect fit.
Yeah.
So I got the go gauge here. I'm gonna pop that in there, and what we're looking for is approximately 8 to 10 thousandths past that. And this can be a little precarious to measure sometimes. Got to make sure that it's stable. Make sure that it's seated all the way in. Yeah, and make sure that I'm not moving this back and forth. Because if I want, I can get a 0 on this every time. But that's obviously not correct. So right now I'm sitting right at about 9 thousandths. This is where we want to be. And I'm going to leave it right there and then move on.